From exhibits to Colossus and now to Hyperia in 2024, welcome to the history of Thorpe Park. Thorpe Park opened on the 24th of May 1979, looking very different to what the island looks like now. Advertised as an adventure of leisure, the 400 acres stretched right the way through the park as you know today and off towards the ski venue and Treasure Island. Formerly owned by RMC, Ready Mix Concrete, it was transformed from an old gravel pit. The park opened as a family entertainment and water attraction with a host of exhibits. These included, but not limited to, the Royal Pavilion, the Dome as we now know it today. This was the first permanent entertainment structure at the park, which featured restaurants, ice creams and bars. As a main hub, it was the best place to catch the water buses, which later went on to the farm, however at the time, took you round to see points of interest around the park. In the first couple of years, you could expect to see some of these exhibits. They included the Abbey Lake Water Sports, the Fleet Army, the Schneider Trophy. On St Anne's Lake there was skiing, canoe and rowing boats, lifeboat station, Model World, which was an integral part of the park going forward, along with King John's Pavilion, Saxon Hall, Viking Longboat, Treasure Island, Roman Gallery, Octopus Island, Manor Lake, White Horse, Stone Age Cave, Celtic Farm and more. Old Thorpe Park isn't generally remembered as well as Alton Towers or Chessington when it becomes a theme park. Chessington opened in 1987. Even then, for the 80s for Thorpe Park and even early 90s, it's not covered in massive detail. Even maps are hard to come by with accurate information. In this video, we'll gather the timeline for you right the way up to 2024 and cover the 45 years of Thorpe Park. 1979 and the 24th of May, Thorpe Park was officially opened to the public. Opened by the late Lord Louis Mountbatten, who was assassinated only a few months later, the park included, as we said, the Mountbatten Pavilion, now known as the Dome. This included Model World, World War I, aircraft display and the Schneider Trophy aircraft exhibition. There were lots of things to look at the park. Quite honestly, probably more like a museum than it is known today as a theme park. In 1980, the water bus trips opened. Going from the Mountbatten Pavilion, these would take you around the park and in later times as well take you across to the farm. Windsurfing also began at the park in 1980. In 1981, a UK first opened at the park in the Cinema 180. The Cinema 180 was a venue where you would stand inside this screen which took up, as you can imagine, 180 degrees. You would be simulated into a world, from what I remember riding it, a roller coaster, and you would go on a cinematic journey on the coaster. It was the only one of its type that opened. It was quite a complex system as well back in the day. I mean, we are talking 1981. This was also joined by the children's ride area, which was open for the first time. 1982 saw Thorpe Farm open at the park. This would remain stable for many years, with water buses going from Mount Pavilion early on and then going from Model World later in its lifetime. 1983 was a big year for the park. It included the opening of several attractions and an adopt pay once price policy rather than paying per attraction. Magic Mill opened this year, as well as Phantom Fantasia, the fantastic ghost train. This was also joined by Treasure Island Railway, as you can imagine, taking you along to Treasure Island, and also the Fort Bell, which was a restaurant and entertainment area opened on the lake. This would later be used for Saw Alive horror maze during Fright Nights. 1984 and the first roller coaster came to Thorpe Park, and that came in the form of the powered coaster Space Station Zero. Opening in complete darkness, Space Station Zero is what we now know as the Flying Fish, and actually opened with over-the-shoulder restraints. 1985 and Cap and Andy's Review opened at the park. This musical animatronic show, very similar to Disney Magic Kingdom's Country Bears, opened to massive acclaim, with people absolutely loving the animatronics, which many had never seen before. A big year for the park and a show that lasted many years to come. 1986 and the Teacup Ride opened at the park. As they continue to open new rides, the Teacup Ride is still there in 2024, now known as Double Tea Party. Was a big investment for the park. However, 1987 would see the biggest investment yet. Thunder River and a new area called European Square opened at the park. The Intermittent Rapids rides, which again is still at the park to this day as Rumba Rapids, opened at a cost of over $2 million and was a huge investment for the park, particularly in a year where Chessington World of Adventures was opening only 10-15 miles down the road. 1988 may have seen a slightly quieter year at the park. However, the Palladium Theatre opened at the park, which was a 630-seat theatre, pretty much in the middle of where you are now. As you can gather, this is now home to the all-new Ready Player One 4D cinema, or indeed the 4D cinema, which has been there since Pirates 4D. So it's still there to this day, opened in 1988. A huge year for the park in 1989 as they celebrated their 10th year anniversary in style by opening Canada Creek. This in turn also brought new mascots to the park in the Thorpe Park Rangers, which many of you will love and cherish. Canada Creek opened with the Canada Creek Railway, which went down to the Thorpe Farm, and of course Loggers Leap, which was Britain's highest log flume, featuring the double drop. This year as well also saw Rocky Express open to complete the Canada Creek area, which up to sort of 5-10 years ago is what we remember it as. There was quite a lot of investment in the park in 1990, with other investments now happening across the country in theme parks. Space Station Zero, which was located indoors, is moved outside and located next to Model World as the Flying Fish. It was given a complete retheme and given new restraints as well, so it moved from over the shoulder to lap bars and is still at the park now even after another move. This year also saw Carousel Kingdom open, which opened indoors, Trapper's Trail, Drive It in the Country, which would later become an incarnation of Miss Hippo's Fungal Safari, and the Thorpe Park Rangers shows joined the park. 1991 and another UK first to the park. With Fantasy Reef opening comes the opening of Depth Charge, which was the UK's first 4-lane water slide. Depth Charge is another ride which still remains at the park in 2024. 1992 and the Hudson River Rafts open at the park, with the Viking Rows opening up on the lakes around the park. I remember going on this and getting stuck several times. In this year also, the children's area is redeveloped as Octopus Gardens, which remained at the park for many years to come. What was probably best known at the time as the park's biggest thrill ride was to open in 1993. The travelling TriStar ride was brought in as Calgary Stampede and themed into Canada Creek. They also opened a virtual reality centre, while sadly the Treasure Island Railway closed. Now the Treasure Island train would remain at the park and be used as a recovery train for the main Canada Creek Railway right the way up to its removal. The train was then moved out later on in life and ended up at Hayling Light Railway in 2024. 1994, Thorpe Park really embraced the Thorpe Park Rangers, with Ranger County opening at the park, also bringing 2 new rides to the park. That was Chief Ranger's Carousel, which was a fantastic themed carousel, along with Mr. Monkey's Banana Ride, which is still at the park in 2024. The Ghost Train Phantom Fantasia was also rethemed into Wicked Witch's Haunt, with the Jungle Zone Family Golf opening where Rush is now sat. 1995 and the Drive It in the Country track ride was sort of moved and rethemed to Miss Hippo's Fungal Safari. The Magic Mill ride is rethemed to Mr. Rabbit's Tropical Travels, which would remain at the park again for quite a few more years yet. RMC spent probably the most money on the park in 1996 with the opening of X:/No Way Out. This sort of space themed ride was the world's first pitch black backwards roller coaster opening. And quite amazing really that this little park had opened this ride, this indoor attraction, and it was really quite unique. Remaining at the park to this day in one form or another, /No Way Out really set the park aside as something different and a reason to visit with the world's first aspect. 1997 was a small investment year for the park as RMC were looking to sell on. Dino Boats and Wet Wet Wet, which was the water slides located next to Depth Charge, opened, whilst unfortunately the Hudson River Rafters closed at the end of the season. 1998 and RMC do indeed sell Thorpe Park to the Tussauds group. In doing so, they do actually open Daredevil Drivers, which was a bumper car Dodgems attraction which opened at the beginning of the season. 1999, the Tussauds group were going to put another stamp on the park and open another UK's first experience. 1999, Pirates 4D, my favourite 4D show that Thorpe Park have ever had, opened as the UK's first 4D experience. Sitting in the old Palladium Theatre building, as we said, the 630-seater building, this was an incredible movie. Brought over from Busch Gardens, starring Leslie Nielsen. Very funny, very entertaining, and the first chance we got to see 4D in the UK. Viking River Rowers, Dino Boats and Carousel Kingdom all closed though in 1999. The year 2000 and another huge attraction opened at the park, and it was Europe's tallest water ride, that being Tidal Wave. Tidal Wave still sits at the park in 2024 and is an absolute fan favourite, particularly on a hot day. The Fantasy Reef area, which is where Depth Charge and Wet 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 was located, is renamed Neptune's Kingdom. Unfortunately, the glory of the year 2000 wasn't to be lived throughout the year, as a devastating fire hit the park on Friday the 21st of July. This completely wiped out the Wicked Witch's Haunt attraction, completely destroying it, as well as ride building damage to Mr. Rabbit's Tropical Travels. Because of this, during the year, the park did bring in a Huss Enterprise to sit down and ease the fact that they had lost a couple of attractions and ensure that people were still coming to the park. However, as Tussauds were looking to develop Thorpe Park, several attractions did close at the end of the year. This included the Jungle Zone Family Golf, the Daredevil Drivers, Cap and Andy's Review and Trapper's Trail, all closing at the end of 2000. Many say that the fire turned Thorpe Park into a completely different direction, and 2001 saw a trio of thrill rides open, all of which are still at the park. The first one being Detonator, the 100+ foot Fabry drop tower, replacing Wicked Witch's Haunt, sitting on the place where that had unfortunately burnt down. This was joined by the KMG Afterburner Vortex and of course Zodiac. Zodiac was the Huss Enterprise which was brought to the park in the year 2000 after the fire, and that made its permanent home at the park in 2001. 2002, and this is where many people's history of Thorpe Park begins, and that's because Colossus, the world's first 10 looping roller coaster, opened at the park. Colossus, the Intamin ride designed by John Wardley, was a slight extension of the 8 looping one which could be found around the world, and would remain the only 10 looping coaster for many years to come. It drove a lot of people to the park. But they didn't rest on that. Thunder River was rethemed to Ribena Rumba Rapids, giving it a bit of a refresh, and of course 2002 saw the annual event Fright Nights come in for the first time. The 2002 Fright Nights saw the incredible Freezer open. This dark attraction full of strobe lights was one of the best I had experienced at the time. This was also open with the Freak Show 3D and a scare zone which was located between the two of them. It kicked off a massive event for the park, which is still huge to this day. As we go through, we will let you know exactly which attractions were open for which year. The park continued to make a huge statement in 2003, even after adding a world record-breaking coaster in 2002. 2003 saw the opening of Nemesis Inferno, the B&M inverted coaster, borrowing the name Nemesis so the public knew what kind of ride it was. Nemesis Inferno again is a fan favourite even to this day. That was joined at the park by Eclipse and Quantum, Eclipse being the Ferris wheel and Quantum being the magic carpet, which still remains at the park to this day. At the end of 2003, it was announced that a new ride brought in from Chessington World of Adventures would arrive in 2004, which meant the end of the Calgary Stampede. 2003, Fright Nights continued to grow with the Freezer and the Freak Show 3D returning. Now there wasn't a scare zone this year. Horror Movie Bites took over in 2003 the 4D cinema, giving you classic horror movies like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, just little clips which were used. Actors were also used as well to scare the audience. 2004 and the incredible Mondial Top Scan arrives at Thorpe Park from Chessington World of Adventures. Only opening there in 1999, it was completely rethemed and recoloured, replacing the Calgary Stampede, sitting where it is still today. Now the water bus trips ended at the park at the end of 2004 with the Flying Fish and Model World to close. Whilst it wasn't known at the time what the reason for this was, it would become very apparent very quickly. Over at Fright Nights, it was very similar to the year before, with the two mazes returning in the Freezer and the Freak Show 3D. This was also joined by the Carnival of the Bizarre, a freak show which was held inside the Pirates 4D cinema. 2005 and the thrills kept coming at Thorpe Park with the opening of two major thrill rides. Slammer, the S&S Sky Squat, became only the second in the world to open and would actually be the last one open as well when it closed later on in its life. And that was joined by Rush, which was the giant S&S swing. This was the largest of its type that had opened in the world and really set aside Thorpe Park in the thrill market. Now sadly the last Thorpe Park Ranger show was performed in 2005 and that was closed at the end of the year. 2005 and they shaped up the event for Fright Nights. That included the Asylum replacing the Freezer, which was just sort of a rerouted route through it, and Hellgate replacing Freak Show 3D. Freak Show 3D was a very bright maze where Hellgate was quite opposite, a little bit darker. A full sense of security movie was also broadcast as well. However, being broadcast outside, you were lucky if you managed to get to see it because it didn't last very long and wasn't put back up after a tear in the screen. And also as well, the pass holders got a chance to go on a ghost walk down the famous Monk's Walk around the back of the park. 2006 and Thorpe Park's icon ride opened at the park. The launch coaster, the intimate accelerator coaster Stealth opens. Stealth shooting riders from 0 to 80 miles an hour in then 2.1 seconds has since been upgraded and now shoots you in 1.8, making it the fastest accelerating coaster to 80 miles an hour from a 0 standing point in the world even to this day. Sadly, at the end of the year, after losing the boat tours, we also lose Thorpe Farm, closing at the end of 2006. Fright Nights for 2006 saw a third maze added for the first time. Joining the Asylum and Hellgate, 7 was added based around the 7 deadly sins. And let me tell you, although this wasn't a particularly scary maze, the detail on here still remains to this day one of the best mazes that Thorpe Park have ever done. I absolutely love 7. It was a fantastic experience. This was joined by the Circus of Horrors, the world famous Circus of Horrors, and the Carnival of the Bizarre, putting shows on inside the park. 2007 and Merlin Entertainments buy out the Tussauds group, which included Thorpe Park. Merlin Entertainments are still operating Thorpe Park to this day, and in 2007 they bought back the Flying Fish, which had closed for the construction of Stealth. Set in a new location with another spruce up as well, the Flying Fish changes colour and features all new lap bars. Sadly, at the end of the year, we saw the end of the Pirates 4D show as this was going to be upgraded for 2008. Fright Nights for 2007 saw the 3 mazes return once again. Asylum, Hellgate and 7 were all hugely popular, repeating the 2006 lineup. One of the big things for 2007 was the return of the Carnival of the Bizarre. The Circus of Horrors show was now out on the park. With little stages around the park, people could get really up and close to some of the action, and it was not for the faint-hearted. 2008 and Time Voyagers 4D opened on the old Pirates 4D site. This very strange movie was translated from a European park and didn't really hit very well with audiences, giving more than a mixed review. This was also the last year of Miss Hippo's Fungal Safari, which closed at the end of 2008. For the Fright fans, Fright Nights was the biggest yet. Asylum, Hellgate and 7 all returning, joined by The Curse, another incredible detailed maze set on a haunted ship. The Curse is still referenced now as one of people's favourite mazes and was much more all about jump scares and some lovely new effects that would just really put you on edge throughout. Carnival of the Bazaar returned again. Circus of Horrors were out and about for 2008. 2009 and a world record breaker opens at Thorpe Park, albeit not for very long at all. Saw broke the record for the steepest drop on any coaster. The Gerstlauer Eurofighter still remains at the park these days, still themed to Saw as well, features a 100-foot drop and 4 inversions themed around the horror franchise. The park capitalised on Saw the ride as well for Fright Nights, with all the mazes returning. Saw the ride became live at Fright Nights. They had some props and various bits and pieces from the Saw movies which were used to scare people throughout the queues. 2010 and they adopted Saw even further. The old Fort Bell previous restaurant floating on the water was converted into a Saw Alive horror maze, and all year round horror maze as well. And this again was incredibly well detailed, sitting next to where the coaster actually sat. You could get your whole Saw fix in one area. Sadly, at the end of the year, we would see the closure of Octopus Gardens. The children's area would be removed from the park, with a new ride opening in 2011. Now 2010, Fright Nights brought back all the previous mazes again with the addition of Saw Alive, which although had been open all year, always feels a bit better in the dark. The park also adopted a scare zone again in Dead End Terror Zone, which would open for the first time since the event started. Shows this year were Barry and Stuart the Extreme Magicians, held in the 4D Theatre. This was an incredible show. 2011 and Storm Surge arrives at the park. At the end of the year, unfortunately, we would lose Canada Creek Railway, and the short-lived Time Voyagers 4D show had only been in situ a few years, but certainly was not very popular. On the plus side, Fright Night celebrates its 10th birthday with a brand new maze opening. Although Hellgate was closed, Asylum, 7, The Cursed, and of course Saw Alive returned with a new shipping container maze, Experiment 10. And this wasn't an ordinary maze, this was quite intense with multiple routes. It was a really incredible experience, and one that many people still wish was at the park now. Barry and Stuart returned also for 2011 to make the event extraordinary for its 10th birthday. 2012 and another big roller coaster opens at Thorpe Park, and arguably the best themed roller coaster the park had seen. The Swarm, Europe's tallest wing roller coaster, opened at the park, and although it seemed to open to a mixed reception, arguably the Swarm now is widely regarded as Thorpe Park's best roller coaster. Seated on its own island, still known as Swarm Island to this day all by itself, the detail of the area is magnificent, with some great near misses and some huge theming props. 2012 also saw a slight shake up in the Fright Nights event, with Asylum, 7, The Curse and Saw Alive all returning with Experiment 10. Saw Alive was no longer an all year round maze, although Saw Alive did open with the park. After a few weeks, this was taken back and then became an exclusive Fright Nights attraction. On the old Hellgate site, The Passing opened, and this was the very first maze that the park had charged for. Not very well received, The Passing would only last one season, which included a bag over your head and crawling around up and down slopes. Little shows in the dome by the governor made it look like the Thorpe Park was on lockdown. After the introduction of the Swarm in 2012, the numbers weren't driving in as much as what Thorpe Park had hoped. So in 2013, the Swarm was changed, with the 2 back rows being reversed so you could brave it backwards. In addition to this as well, a billboard theme was added as another near miss, which remains at the park to this day. X:/No Way Out was also rethemed for the first time in 2013, with it becoming X. Oddly enough, the cars were turned round so it faced forward, and it became a ride of light and sound. The height restriction was also lowered, meaning that people that couldn't go on it could have it now as their first coaster. This was also the first year the park opened on-site accommodation with the crash pad. 2013 was a huge year for Fright Nights, as a deal was struck with Lionsgate to bring some all-new mazes to the park. The Cabin in the Woods, My Bloody Valentine, Blair Witch Project all came in as mazes around the park, with Saw Alive returning along with The Asylum. Your Next characters were roaming the streets, and the director icon was brought in to bring it all together. A huge year for the park, with Cabin in the Woods being a multi-option maze and My Bloody Valentine overtaking Experiment 10. Blair Witch Project was all based outside with a walk along the side of the park and had to be something you did at night. 2014 saw the crash pad change to the Thorpe Park Hotel. The park's new waterfront accommodation opened. Whilst Chief Ranger's Carousel and the Ranger County Arena all closed, we had Angry Birds come in for 2014. Angry Birds brought a retheme for Detonator to Detonator's Bombs Away, with the reintroduction of Dodgems to the park for King Pig's Wild Hog Dodgems. This was also included with a brand new 4D show, Angry Birds 4D. Fright Nights came with a very similar lineup to the previous years, however there was a new maze. Returning Cabin in the Woods, My Bloody Valentine, Saw Alive and the Blair Witch Project. With the removal of the Passing and the Asylum came the brand new Studio 13. We'd seen the director the previous year, he now had his own maze in Studio 13. In the location of what had been Studio 13 and indeed a horror maze for several years now, 2015 saw that change with the opening of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. The interactive actor-led experience opened on that site and would become a staple for the park, open all year round from that year. We did lose Logger's Leap, the double drop what was once UK's tallest log flume, in 2015, closing at the end of the season. With that in mind, Studio 13 didn't return for 2015's Fright Nights. However, that was led to the returning Cabin in the Woods, My Bloody Valentine, Saw Alive and the Blair Witch Project. That was joined by a new maze on the beach, which we hadn't seen since The Curse. The Big Top, the Clown maze, opened for the first time and would return again in 2016. 2016 and a huge investment for the park. On the old arena site, a new build in Darren Brown's Ghost Train opened. Though still is at the park these days, opened as a VR experience, the first of its type to use it, combining VR, a physical ride, some really nice effects, and a part story in the middle, was something very unique for the park. It opened to a mixed review, mainly due to the use of the VR, the quality of the VR and the VR actually working. However, some of the effects in there, including the floating train, were magnificent. One big thing for 2016 was the swarm. The two back rows, which had been facing backwards for a couple of years, were turned around once again. This was due to an incident at another Merlin park, with all the rows now facing forward. However, with 15-year anniversary of Fright Nights comes another new maze to the park. We have the returning Cabin of the Woods, Saw Alive, Blair Witch, no My Bloody Valentine. However, the Big Top returned and was much better. This was joined by Platform 15, a stable at the park for many years to come. Platform 15 would take you round the back of the old Logger's Leap and give you a really story-led experience. 2017 saw some upgrades to Darren Brown's Ghost Train, becoming Darren Brown Rise of the Demon. We had some new VR, some more going on in the middle as well, as they tried to iron out all the technical glitches with it. It was brand new technology, it was kind of expected. If it worked, it was an incredible experience. 2017 also saw two new family rides arrive at the park down in Old Town, previously Canada Creek. With the closure of Logger's Leap, it spruced up the area a bit down there with Timber Tugboat and Lumberjump, both coming from Weymouth Sea Life. 2017 saw a big shake-up for Fright Nights, with Platform 15 returning with some more spaces for actors to hide, the Big Top returning for its best outing yet, Saw Alive returning, and they were joined by two Walking Dead mazes. An outdoor one, the Walking Dead Sanctum, which was a good one but not brilliant, however was easily eclipsed by the Walking Dead Living Nightmare, located on the previous Hellgate site. This was an incredible detail maze experience. The year of The Walking Dead continued into 2018 with X being rethemed to The Walking Dead The Ride. And actually, this is the best incarnation of the ride so far. Some of the detail in there is absolutely incredible, and very often during peak days, you can experience this live and be chased out by zombies. I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here was to close at the end of the year. However, Fright Nights was again huge for the park in 2018. With the return of Platform 15, Blair Witch, Saw Alive, and The Walking Dead Living Nightmare became the new Walking Dead Do or Die containment, which was relocated from a previous year and was much better, particularly if you did it at night. This was also included with Dead Creek Woods, which was down at the back of the park, and the really bad Vulcan Peak, which was sort of a hash version of I'm a Celebrity. Once that had closed, they put a bag on your head for Vulcan Peak. It was not a good experience. Unfortunately, no Big Top for this year. However, the shows really did up with Screenplex in the cinema, and the Big Top was kind of taken out and about for little bits of shows rather than a maze, and Terror at Amity High made its debut in 2018. The 40th anniversary of Thorpe Park in 2019, and they celebrated it with a 96-metre inflatable course, Bouncezilla. I have to say, I absolutely love Bouncezilla, and I cannot believe it hasn't made a return since 2019. There was a one-off gaming event in Game FX as well, where you could go in and play a few games and things, and Jungle Escape, an escape room style house, went into the old I'm a Celebrity building. Jungle Escape was an additional add-on, and it acted as kind of an escape room for the park, which was quite big as 2019 came in. 2019 again saw an upgrade in Fright Nights, with some returning and some brand new. Platform 15 returned along with The Walking Dead Living Nightmare, Blair Witch and The Walking Dead Do or Die. Whilst there were less mazes this year, they were of far better quality, as highlighted by the brand new maze Creek Freak Massacre, a stunning attraction built on the old Loggers Leap station site. Went for a good few years, and it was proper intense, dark and really interactive. A great addition to the park. Shows came back including the Screenplex Cinema, Terror at Amity High and the Fear 5 Challenge, about riding all the coasters in the dark. Due to global events, obviously 2020 was a slow year for the park. Not open until July, the highlight really came as Fright Night started to kick in, and even that was toned down considerably due to what was going on. 2020 saw just 2 mazes open at the park, which included Platform 15 and Roots of Evil. Platform 15 had been extended, and Roots of Evil was a brand new experience, which all cost extra this year. There were quite a few shows and actors roaming this year, including Swarm Invasion, the Creek Freak Unchained, which brought them all out and about, and of course Amity High. This also introduced the Crows to the park for the first time. 2021, an Old Town as we know it. Indeed, the Old Canada Creek closes along with the Rocky Express and the Timber Tugboat. It would be another year before Lumberjump is located to Amity and rethemed as High Striker. New for 2021 though was Black Mirror Labyrinth, a new walkthrough that the park put in next to Slammer, where a lot of the old mazes had been. This was technologically brilliant. It was a wonderful walkthrough with an absolute insane mirror maze at the end. An actual maze you could get lost in, spending anywhere between 6 and 15 minutes to get out. Black Mirror was based on the TV show, so anyone that watched that would be a little bit more familiar with what was going on inside. And Fright Nights saw the return of new mazes. Whilst they were all pay-for mazes now, we did get treated to Creek Freak Massacre, the final year for Platform 15, and the brand new Trailers Maze. Trailers Maze was epic, absolutely epic, as you went through a cinema-based experience. Real fun. These were joined by some incredible scare zones, some of which were still at the park in 2023. The Crows of Morecambe Meadow have become very popular. The Amity High shows have become popular. The Swarm Invasion, Creek Freaks Unchained, and of course the Birthday Bash, as they celebrated 20 years of Fright Nights. As we said, 2022 was a quiet year for the park, with Lumberjump relocated to Amity. That is now High Striker and sits at the park still in 2024. 2022 Fright Nights starts obviously with the closure of Platform 15. However, a new purpose-built building has been built and the survival games are now very much at home there. Going into the survival games, you can take several routes through there and get lost in there for quite a long time as actors look to block you, close exits and keep you walking around. Rejoined by Creek Freak Massacre for the final time. This would be the final time this maze would make an appearance at the park. Trailers is back for another year as well with a host of new shows. Now we say shows, the terminal was a brand new experience at the park. They kind of advertised it as a bit of a maze, but it wasn't really. It was a audio experience. We actually really enjoyed it, to be fair, but we can kind of understand why people didn't think it was particularly good. You really had to have your imagination about you. Scare zones including Death's Doors, which was great fun, Creek Freak Untrained, and of course the Morecambe Meadow Crows returned with Amity High shows, the Birthday Bash and the Fire Show Legacy returning for the second year as well. 2023 saw the end of the contract for Darren Brown at the park, and Darren Brown's Ghost Train ceased to operate with the VR removed from the ride. Darren Brown's Ghost Train becomes Ghost Train, which is a new actor-led experience. So gone is the VR and the actors guide you all the way through the ride with some all new effects, some all new wonderful paint parts and of course a new story. Storm in a Teacup is rethemed as Double Tea Party, and Angry Birds Land and Black Mirror were both to close at the end of 2023. Not only were they closing, but we had something big coming in 2024. But of course, before then, Fright Nights is back, and it's back with a brand new maze, Stitches. It's the first time the park have built a new maze for quite a while, with obviously success of Creek Freak Massacre. This one was a fantastic toy shop looking maze, a real treat, and hopefully returns in 2024. New shows include Lucifer's Lair, Creatures, Campers, and of course returning mazes in the survival games and trailers. Death's Doors and the Crows also return for 2023. 2024, and it feels like a brand new Thorpe Park. Of course, let's get it out of the way first. Angry Birds has gone and has been rethemed as Big Easy Boulevard. That brings Detonator back as it was. Big Easy bumpers replacing the King Pigs Dodgems, and a brand new cinema show in Ready Player One for the experience. It's the first time as well in many years that Thorpe Park launches its new logo and branding, becoming the home of Feel Good Thrills. The whole park is given a bit of a freshen up, with Colossus starting to be painted, Stealth receiving some touch-ups, Samurai going back to its original colours. But of course, the big news for 2024 was the opening of Hyperia, the first roller coaster to come to the park since 2012. Hyperia is the UK's tallest and fastest coaster, standing at 236 feet. Considerably taller than the big one, but if you want to count it from sea level, 1 foot taller than the big one, but considerably taller than the big one. This reaches speeds of over 80 miles an hour, meaning that Thorpe Park now have the two fastest coasters in the country. Hyperia is an absolute beast of a machine, featuring elements that many have never seen before or haven't been done before, and also features Europe's tallest inversion. That brings us up to date with Thorpe Park and its history over the last 45 years. Now, there's no announcements of Fright Nights yet. If I had to be a betting man, I would say we're going to get a brand new replacement for trailers. What do you think? What are your biggest memories of Thorpe Park over the last 45 years? Please leave them in the comments below, and I really hope you've enjoyed the video.